We are going to be talking to a guy who was the former Chief of Staff in the House of Representatives. He's worked in Washington. I'm a massive fan of the House of Cards. Anyway, he's also spent time in prison. He's written a lot. He was a former boyfriend of Mary Colvin, you know, the Sunday Times journalist who was killed in Syria.
Yep.
When they looked at her belongings, sorry, I shouldn't gabble this, but it is really moving. They found his manuscript amongst her belongings that they brought back because she so encouraged him to write. Extraordinary story. He's right at the top of the show, sitting in the soft area, as we like to call reception, probably wondering what the hell he's going to be contributing to. I am really pleased to say we have the author of a novel called The First Gentleman. This is a guy who is a former Chief of Staff in the House of Representatives, a political analyst, and a lobbyist. This should be a very interesting discussion if I can not get my tongue around that. But the book is wonderful. As I say, it's a novel, and it's by Gerald Weaver. And Gerald Weaver is going to be joining me straight after. Now, we obviously have a female Prime Minister, but the USA is really leading the way in female politicians, with Hillary Clinton's election campaign and then Michelle Obama giving that quite extraordinary speech. What is it about American politics that engrosses all of us? From Marilyn Monroe onwards, is it the glitter of Hollywood, do you think, that adds to its appeal? When someone who knows an awful lot more and from the inside is Gerald Weaver. He worked in Washington for years. He has a new book out called The First Gentleman, and he joins me on the afternoon show. Welcome, Gerald.
Hello, Joe. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I said, sitting out there listening to me trail the show, you must have thought, what on earth am I walking into? My first question is, do you have a dog?
No, I've had several, but I have none now, thank you.
Well, I'm going to say this. We did a whole item on when Obama came in as president. The first move he did, which I thought was a great political move, was get a dog.
Yes, so it's a Portuguese water dog.
Yes, absolutely. So hyperallergenic, so no one's going to sneeze if they sit on the sofa. Do you think it was a political move, that?
No, I think he had two pre-adolescent daughters who desperately wanted a dog, especially in Washington where President Truman once said, if you want a friend, get a dog.
So he was just living up to his promises.
I suppose. I believe, yeah.
In my introduction there, I mean, it's an extraordinary time for you to bring this book out, isn't it, really? Because it is based on a female running for president. And at the moment, we are living or witnessing one of the most exciting... Is it? I mean, for me, it is, as a woman, to watch this campaign that seems to go on and on and on in America. It does take a long time, doesn't it, all this campaigning? But did you time this especially for that?
Actually, I wrote the book 3 years ago, and it's... U.S. copyright was 2 years ago, and I had several intentions, and one of them was to puncture what I call the political orthodoxy. There are a lot of things in national political debate about which there are no discussion, the energy policy, war on terror, war on drugs. And I also wanted to say something about redefining gender roles, which I think is something that's coming down the pipe. I think it's going to sneak up on us slowly, and then one day the women will be in charge, and that'll be a much better time.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because when Theresa May got in, I don't know how long you've been over. Have you been in London for a while?
I've been here for a week. Right?
So you've probably been following the antics of strange things that have happened this summer.
Right, I saw Boris Johnson appointed to foreign minister.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, have we got time to talk about that? Maybe not. But it was, she arrived at Downing Street followed by two other female members of her cabinet. And there was this, and we all mentioned it here, there was this, for me watching it, this wonderful feeling of sort of tranquility, just watching three women walk through number 10. Can you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. I grew up with three sisters and no brothers, and when I first ran my original successful long shot campaign, I can remember that I hired a woman and I said, you have to make these 50 calls, and I didn't hear back from her until she'd made them. And I hired a man and I said, you have to make these 50 calls, and he blew a bunch of smoke and went out and had a beer. So I think that there's going to be a strong economic and social reason for people to hire women, to send women to college and let them run things.
And I always say, hopefully there'll be no wars. I mean, that's a bit idealistic, if you have women discussing stuff. Which brings me on to your book, because your main protagonist is a war hero.
Yes, she is. I wanted her to have a certain, veneer that would make her very attractive, because she was also going to do things that were unorthodox and unusual that I think Hillary Clinton is not able to do, because she has to be very cautious. I think there's a reservoir of sexism out there that she has to be careful not to stir up any more than she already has, and she has to be cautious politically as well. But my candidate's a bit different.
And it's seen. This is what I think is so interesting, because you write through a woman's eyes and through a male eye as well. Let's talk about the two main protagonists and their relationship.
Well, it's besides puncturing the political orthodoxy and redefining gender roles, I also wrote it as a love story, and I wanted to write it as a love story where this very bold but somewhat wounded psychologically and emotionally woman falls in love with a man because he's nurturing and supporting, and he'd raised his children, so he learned how to love through the template of taking care of his children and being a single father. So instead of being big and bold and handsome or even adorable, she loves him because he's very, very nurturing. And I wanted to portray a love story like that, and I'm not sure there have been many.
I like the way it's set out. So I like the aesthetics of it, because you start, the very first chapter is his startling beginning. So you read his startling beginning, and then you get onto her, and it's her equally startling beginning. And that sort of, as a reader, you know where you are. It's a very clever ploy, that, actually.
I have to say, I borrowed it from Charles Dickens, who's one of my favorite writers. And if you are a Dickens scholar, the Dickens references will rise up out of this book like a palimpsest. But if you're not a Dickens scholar, you'll pretty much enjoy it for the love story, political thriller, and social commentary that it is. But yeah, that's a Dickens device. So.
You talking about love within politics and a love story, and this is, as I say, it's a work of fiction, but it's based on so much research that you've had in your own life. One of them being that you were great friends with Mary Colvin, and for listeners, hopefully they will remember her because she was the Sunday Times journalist who was killed in Syria. And this is, I know you get quite emotional, but we all pick on this when we interview you, because they found your manuscript amongst her belongings. And you tell this story of, for some odd reason, the morning after she'd died, and you didn't even know that, you Googled her name, and then you found all these horrendous details of her death. Can you just, relive that a bit for us, and just tell us how then you discovered that she'd got your manuscript with her?
Well, my friend Harold Bloom says that love becomes more precious as we get older because we're spending it on people who are no longer there. And Marie was a once-in-a-lifetime woman, and as amazing as she was to the public in person, she was even more interesting and exciting and bold and irreverent. But I would get up every morning at 5 and write my first novel, and I'd send her an email. But for once, for some reason, I decided to Google her, and I don't know, and I discovered she was dead. But it was about a month later, I was at her funeral in New York, and her sister tapped me on the shoulder and said, her remains came back with this black knapsack, and in it was your manuscript, a satellite phone, and clean underwear, and she carried that over barbed wire fences and through sewers, so she must have been very involved in that book. So it was at the same time a very sad thing and also an honor and a responsibility. I really felt that book had to get out and be published after that.
Because she'd always been your number one fan, hadn't she? She'd always said, look, your emails read like,
better than novels.
Yes.
Yes.
So that must have given you the drive.
Well, no, I've always had the drive, but you're absolutely right that was the Wizard of Oz moment. There's a scene in Wizard of Oz where the guy comes out from behind the counter or the curtain and tells the scarecrow, you always had a brain, you just didn't have a diploma. And that was what Marie said. She said, I know novelists, and you write just as well or better. So,
do you mind if we also talk about, you spent 15 months in prison.
Right.
And I have a morbid fascination with incarceration, so much so that I fear I probably will end up. Because I am so obsessed with how people deal with themselves when their liberty has been removed. But it was a very strange thing for you, because you were in a prison, having pleaded guilty, whether you were or not, we don't need to go into, but you are a lawyer within a prison, but you didn't let anybody know, did you?
No, they hate lawyers because their lawyers were pretty bad, and the prosecuting attorneys were evil and vicious and mean-spirited. Several things about prison. I could talk forever. I've known CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. I've had, gone out drinking with the vice presidents and senators, and now I can add to that list, mafia gangsters and actual killers. But the main thing I came out of prison with, and it's probably in this book, is that the American criminal justice system is racist in its effect, whether it's not in its intent. And I was surrounded by innocent black men, and I didn't find that out until 6 months or so after I was in, which is the time I let people know I was a lawyer. I didn't let anybody know before that, but after they got comfortable with me and I had some respect, it became known, and then I was inundated with these sad, sorrowful cases where men were innocent or else very relatively innocent, and it was some of the worst reading I've ever done in my life, and I'm a lifelong voracious reader.
And so were you working for them?
I did what I can in every case. I mean, speaking of reading, every once in a while I'd get one where a gentleman was quite a bit more guilty and, should have been sent somewhere very serious, and he was sitting right next to me, and I didn't want to say, well, I'm not going to help you, but I had to do that, and that was pretty scary. Yeah.
Do you think you changed after 15 months of incarceration?
I always say that not everyone should go to prison, but it does teach you some lessons. I had an amazing career. I made a lot of money. I had a tremendous perquisites and lots of glamour and power, and I never missed one of those one bit. I just I missed my children and my wife, and I didn't really even miss them. I really felt badly, mainly for the effect that my absence would have on their life. And then once you do that, it's hard to be silly. You have to, you approach life much more seriously.
And do you? Yes, I'm sure you do. But do you also fear of going back in? Because I always say it's so easy to be unlawful. It's just so easy, isn't it? If you have a car, for instance, you will probably breaking the law endlessly.
Conservative columnist George Will in the United States says that a ham sandwich could be indicted and sent to Yale, and that's true. Or jail, I mean. I get Yale and jail mixed up because I've been both places, but it's true. And in a lot of ways, my case was the exception that proved the rule about that, because I was well off and I was well educated and I was white, and my case involved stuff that happened years and years ago and no real evidence. But even given that, I would plead guilty. I mean, I was looking at 7 years otherwise, and it was very difficult. So that's true. I mean, and if you've been through the process, you come out. I don't care where you are. If you're at your mother's house or at McDonald's, the next, several years, you always have the feeling that the hand of authority is going to reach down and grab you.
I'm sure.
And what you say is true, Joe, because it can happen to anyone. I mean, almost literally. The attorney who prosecuted me said I can take anybody off the street and ruin his life.
Of course. Let's just, because I'm going on holiday next week, so this is my book of choice that I'm taking with me.
I'm honored you'd say that.
Well, and because I don't usually, this is an awful admission, I don't usually read male writers. It's very odd. I didn't realise until my brother, who's very seldom visits me, looked at my bookcase and went, everything's written by a woman. So I'm now making an effort, but I'm not making an effort with you, but to stop just reading female writers. But I like this because it's through a male and a female eyes. So I'm looking forward to reading it. But also, and this is the bit of mainstream now, I am a massive fan of House of Cards. So my question to you is there any, I mean, you've been in the inner sanctum of Washington, is there any kind of, I mean, I always say, and I've interviewed enough politicians, if you're in politics, why the hell don't you become a bit more theatrical? Now, Boris Johnson obviously took that on board, but you need to lift it off the page, don't you? And, whatever, Kevin Spacey, Robin Wright, who's also been on the show, they lift it off the page, and I think we, the public, want that. Does America do it better?
I don't know. I mean, I would have to say yes, obviously. I mean, we have long had this political orthodoxy, which the defining point of it was caution. And if you were to write this political story years ago, you would have to be restrained by having to be cautious to make this people realistic. But we've gone from the West Wing to the House of Cards easily in terms of Donald Trump. To a lesser extent, Bernie Sanders. And I actually think we're beyond that. We're to the comedy Veep, where the primary political person is both selfish and clueless, which is sort of Donald Trump. But you're right about something, and that is, I think for a long time, the American public was tired of this caution and tired of the political orthodoxy and perceived it as being lied to, or thought that they were being handed canned remarks. So the minute that Bernie Sanders stepped out of the line and started talking about universal college education, universal health care, there was a response. And the minute Donald Trump stepped out of line and called the Mexicans rapists, as utterly insane as that is, a certain segment, perhaps the reality TV fans of America, responded to that positively, because he was not a politician. He was someone who was obviously quite different. And he's done that so effectively that he now it seems like he can say or do anything. Yeah. It doesn't catch him up.
Yes.
At least with his supporters.
Do you follow British politics at all? Because what's happened this year is quite extraordinary, and it seems to happen, one's in, and then the one that leaves within. They get their children, they do this grand march down Downing Street, they produce kids that we've never really seen before. It all gets very emotional, then a sofa arrives and the next one's in. I mean, it is quite extraordinary. Have you followed any of it?
Yes, I found that it's surprising that David Cameron's put the Leave Remain question up to a referendum. Sometimes I think there's too much democracy, and you really want a leader, and you're absolutely right about the swiftness of the transition surprises us, because we're used to it being this very long, almost interminable campaign, and then there's the election, and then there's a good 2 months before there's the transition, and there's quite a bit of ceremony before and after the transition. But it was almost like Theresa May was helping David Cameron move his stuff right out of 10 Downing. You're not kidding.
I mean, her car, they had to stall her car because she was in the drive and he hadn't left. I mean, just amazing. I can't wait to finish this. I've only got through the first 1.5 chapters, so this will be my book of choice for my holiday next week. It is called The First Gentleman, and we've been speaking to Gerald Weaver, and it's Melinda Sherman for president. Is that what have you got the button?
Yes, I do.
I've just seen that there.
I'm a Melinda Sherman.
You are a Melinda Sherman, and we're not saying that she's based on anyone, are we?
Well, it's when she opens her mouth, I guess it's probably me. There's a bit of Marie Colvin in there, because Marie was bold and straightforward. But and I want to support the idea of a woman president, but also appeal to the people who may not be completely fond of Hillary. Because Melinda, Hillary is running against Putin's chosen candidate, and Melinda has said that she will breastfeed at any meeting, even if Putin is there. And again, Melinda's a decorated and wounded veteran of the Iraq War, and Hillary's a wounded and decorated veteran of being married to Bill Clinton.
And yet, did you hear Obama this morning, who said there is nobody better qualified, not Bill, not himself, as better qualified than Hillary, because he said she's always been in the room, which I thought was hysterical.
Yeah.
As you're talking to me, one of our listeners, Maeve, says, did you know it's Jackie Kennedy's birthday today? How fitting that you should be here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. It is out now. The First Gentleman is the name, and as I say, the author is Gerald Weaver. Really good to speak to you, Gerald. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Joy.
Get a dog. You must get a dog.
I enjoyed it, and Joe, please do be good.
Always. Goodbye name, goodbye nature.